She was my boss's wife, elegant, untouchable, and way out of my league. But the moment she said I was her distraction, I stopped pretending I didn't feel it too. It started on an ordinary Monday, one of those mornings when the office lights feel too bright, and the air smells faintly of burnt coffee and ambition. I was running late, clutching a folder and trying to remember if I'd sent that last email before the weekend. Then the elevator doors opened, and she stepped out. For a second, I thought I'd walked into the wrong floor. She wasn't supposed to be there, not in our office, not in my line of sight. My boss's wife had this quiet presence that drew attention without trying. She was around 40, graceful in that composed, self-assured way that made everyone else stand a little straighter when she entered the room. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat twist, a few strands falling loose near her cheek, catching the light. She wore a white blouse, simple gold earrings, and the kind of calm confidence that made the whole place feel smaller. She smiled politely at me, and I did what most people do when they don't know what to do, I smiled back. "You must be Daniel," she said. Her voice was soft but clear, a tone that somehow felt both warm and assessing. "Yes, ma'am," I managed, too quickly. "You're the one who makes sure your boss eats lunch," she interrupted with a small laugh. "You can call me Claire." The way she said it, calm, unbothered, told me she was used to being noticed, maybe even used to people stumbling over their words around her. But there was something else in her eyes when she looked at me, curiosity, just a flicker of it. She had come by to drop something off for her husband, but she lingered for a few moments longer than she needed to. We made small talk, about the weather, about how quiet the office was for a Monday. I remember the faint scent of her perfume, jasmine and something faintly woody. It stayed in the air long after she'd walked away. When she left, I told myself it was nothing. Just a polite exchange. But every time I passed my boss's glass-walled office, I caught my own reflection, the one of a man trying not to replay a 10-second moment that didn't mean anything. That night, when I left the building, she was outside waiting for her husband. He was still upstairs, probably finishing calls. She stood by the car, sunlight catching her hair, phone in hand, but not really scrolling. When she noticed me, she gave a small wave, the kind of wave that felt personal, like a secret nod between strangers who shouldn't have one. I nodded back, and that was all. No words, no smile. Just a quiet acknowledgement of something neither of us should have felt. But it was there, that first spark, disguised as nothing more than politeness. And the strangest part? The moment she turned away, I already knew that spark would come back to find me. A few days later, she appeared again, not in the office this time, but at the cafe across the street where I usually went to clear my head. It was the kind of place where the air smelled like cinnamon and espresso, where people sat alone with laptops or newspapers, pretending not to notice anyone else. She noticed me. "Daniel," she said, smiling as if we'd known each other longer than a single Monday morning. "You work across the street, right?" Her tone was casual, but something in her eyes told me she already knew the answer. I nodded, still half caught off guard. "Yeah. I didn't expect to see you here." She shrugged lightly, her gold bracelet glinting as she stirred her coffee. "I come here sometimes when I need a break from everything." That word, everything, hung in the air between us. It wasn't about coffee. It was about something heavier, though she didn't say it. We ended up talking for 20 minutes that felt like 5. About work, about how she missed traveling, about how the city never really slept. She had this way of talking, calm but layered, like there was always something just beneath her words. And when she asked about me, she actually listened, not the polite kind of listening people do in passing, but the kind that makes you feel seen. The cafe was bright that morning, sunlight spilling through the wide windows. Her hair caught the light, the loose strands glowing faintly gold. She laughed once, not loud, but soft and real, and I found myself watching her more than I should have. When her phone buzzed, she glanced at the screen, then looked back at me with a small, resigned smile. "Duty calls," she said, standing up. Don't let your boss see you talking to his wife for too long. The way she said it, half teasing, half warning, left something unspoken between us. After that, our paths crossed more often. Sometimes by accident, sometimes not. She'd drop by the office, always with an excuse, documents, schedules, a forgotten lunch. Sometimes she'd linger by the reception desk just long enough to ask how my day was going. And then there were the small things, the shared elevator rides, the brief exchanges in the hallway. Little moments that didn't belong to anyone else. Once, when we found ourselves alone waiting for the elevator, she said quietly, "You're easy to talk to." That's rare. I wanted to say the same about her, but all I could manage was a small smile. The doors opened, and she stepped inside. I stayed behind, watching the numbers rise until the elevator disappeared. That night, I couldn't stop replaying her words. You're easy to talk to. It shouldn't have meant anything. But somehow, it did. Because when someone who should have remained untouchable starts letting you in, even a little, it's already too late to pretend you're not drawn to them. It was one of those quiet Thursdays when the office felt half asleep. Most of the team was working from home, and even my boss had stepped out for meetings. I was catching up on reports when her voice drifted in from the hallway. "Hardworking as always," she said. I looked up. Claire stood by the door, holding a takeaway cup and wearing that same calm smile, the one that somehow made my thoughts stumble. She looked effortlessly composed, navy blue blouse, hair pulled into a loose knot, a pair of sunglasses resting on her head. "Your husband's not here," I said before I could stop myself. "I know," she replied, walking in with quiet confidence. "I didn't come to see him." For a moment, I didn't breathe. Then she set the coffee on my desk. "You looked like you needed this last time I was here." I remembered. That simple gesture, her remembering, noticing, hit harder than it should have. She leaned against the edge of the desk, looking out the window as sunlight traced the side of her face. "Do you ever feel," she began softly, "like your life is running on autopilot?" The question wasn't meant for me, not really. But it hung in the air between us, and I felt the weight behind it. "Sometimes," I said. "Like you're doing everything right, but none of it feels right." She turned her head slightly, meeting my eyes. There was something raw in her expression, a small, unguarded ache. Exactly that. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged. Not in a way that asked for words, but in the kind that made the heart slow down just enough to notice. We talked for a while after that, about nothing and everything. About how she used to paint before life got too busy. About how I missed home-cooked meals since moving to the city. It was easy, natural, and that was the problem. It shouldn't have been. When she finally stood to leave, her hand brushed mine as she reached for the coffee cup. The touch was brief, but it sent a spark through the quiet like static in the air. She looked at me then, not startled, not embarrassed. Just still. "I should go," she said softly, though she didn't move right away. And when she did, she hesitated at the door. "You're different from most people here," she added, almost under her breath. "How?" I asked. She paused, turned slightly, her profile framed in the sunlight. "You listen." Then she left, the scent of jasmine lingering in the room long after her footsteps faded. That evening, I stayed later than usual, pretending to finish reports. But really, I was replaying every word, every glance, every pause that had stretched too long. The line was still there, faint but visible. But I could feel it bending, slowly, silently. Between us, rain started sometime in the afternoon, soft at first, then steady, a rhythm tapping against the office windows. Everyone else had gone home early, but I stayed behind, finishing a report that didn't really need finishing. The quiet felt different that day, expectant, heavy with thoughts I wasn't supposed to have. When the door opened, I didn't need to look up to know it was her. "Still here?" Claire's voice carried that familiar blend of curiosity and warmth. She stepped in, umbrella in hand, a faint trace of rain on her shoulders. Her dark hair was a little damp, loose now, and her white blouse clung lightly to her skin from the weather outside. I stood, awkwardly brushing at papers that didn't need straightening. Couldn't leave. Too much work. She smiled faintly. Or maybe you didn't want to leave. I didn't answer, not because I didn't have one, but because the air between us suddenly felt too fragile for words. She moved closer, setting her umbrella by the door, and crossed the room to look out the window. The city lights shimmered through the rain, soft and blurred. It's funny, she said quietly, how even noise feels quiet when you're tired enough. Something about her voice, the honesty in it, made me forget she was my boss's wife. She wasn't composed or untouchable in that moment. She was human. Real. I don't think you get tired, I said. You just hide it better. That made her laugh, a quiet, breathy sound that felt too personal for the room we were in. She turned toward me, her expression softer now. You notice too much, Daniel. Maybe, I said. But you don't hide as well as you think. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was suspended, alive. I could hear the rain more clearly now, steady against the glass. She took a slow step closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume again, jasmine and something warmer. You remind me of who I was before, she said softly. Before all of this, noise. Her words were quiet, but they landed deep. I wanted to say something back, something that would make sense of what hung between us, the glances, the pauses, the way time always stretched when she was near. But all that came out was her name, barely a whisper. She looked up at me then, eyes steady, unguarded. And for a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then a flash of lightning lit the room, followed by a low roll of thunder. She blinked, breaking the spell, and took a step back, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath too long. I should go, she murmured. But her hand brushed my arm as she passed, a fleeting, accidental touch that felt anything but. When the door closed behind her, the room seemed smaller. Quieter. I stood there for a long time, watching the rain trace lines down the window, wondering if what just happened was real, or if I'd imagined the entire thing. But I hadn't. I could still feel the warmth of her hand. And I knew, the line we'd both been so careful to protect had just begun to disappear. The next few days were unbearable. I saw her around the office, poised, collected, as if that moment in the rain never happened. But every time our eyes met, something flickered there. A pause too long. A breath that caught halfway. It wasn't in what we said, it was in what we didn't. I tried keeping busy, burying myself in work, small talk, anything that kept my mind off her. But the truth followed me home. It was in the way her laugh echoed in my head, in the memory of her hand brushing against mine. Every thought circled back to her. One evening, I stayed late again. Maybe hoping, maybe dreading that she would walk in. And she did. Claire appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Peace offering, she said, her smile gentle but guarded. I took the cup, fingers brushing hers. That single touch felt louder than any word spoken between us. We sat across from each other, the distance on the table between us suddenly too narrow, too charged. The rain hadn't come back, but the air still felt heavy, like it might. I keep telling myself that what happened the other night didn't mean anything, she said, her eyes on her cup. But lying doesn't suit me. I didn't know what to say. My pulse quickened. Her honesty had weight. I don't want to make things harder, I said carefully. For you, or for him. I know, she whispered. But pretending is worse. Her voice cracked slightly, just enough for me to hear the exhaustion behind her control. Do you ever wake up and wonder when your life stopped feeling like your own? The question wasn't rhetorical. It was confessional. I hesitated, then nodded. Every day since I met you. The silence that followed was suffocating and beautiful all at once. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine, and everything unsaid between us suddenly felt exposed, raw, undeniable. "I didn't plan this," she said, shaking her head as if trying to steady herself. You're not supposed to be in my thoughts." "Then why am I?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She blinked, eyes glistening. "Because you see me," she whispered. "Not the title. Not the ring. Just me." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even a confession. It was surrender, soft, quiet, dangerous. I leaned back, trying to collect myself, but my hands trembled slightly. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand again, but this time not by accident. Instead, I said the only thing that felt safe. "We both know this can't go anywhere." "I know," she said. "But that doesn't mean it hasn't already started." Her voice lingered in the air long after she left the room. I sat there alone, the coffee growing cold, realizing that lines don't blur all at once, they fade slowly, until one day you can't tell where they ever were. And maybe, just maybe, neither of us wanted to find them again. Days passed in a haze of avoidance and stolen glances. The air between us had changed, heavier, quieter, as if every word carried weight. I thought maybe she'd put distance between us after what was said that night. But instead, she did the opposite. She started stopping by my desk again. Small things, a comment about a project, a quiet question about lunch, her hand brushing against my shoulder when she passed behind me. To anyone else, it looked normal. But I knew what it really was, a delicate dance around everything we weren't supposed to feel. That Friday, the office emptied earlier than usual. I was finishing up a report when I heard her voice from the doorway. "You're still here," she said softly, stepping in, heels clicking against the tile. "Just trying to get ahead before Monday." She smiled faintly. "Always responsible." Her tone was light, but her eyes weren't. For a moment, she stood there as if debating something with herself. Then she walked to the window, looking out over the city, bathed in golden evening light. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, and when she spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I wish I could just disappear for a day. No titles. No expectations. Just quiet." I turned in my chair to face her. "Then why don't you?" She looked over her shoulder, smiling faintly, sadly. "Because I always end up coming back to the same life." I didn't realize I'd stood up until I was beside her. The city below glowed in orange and silver, the hum of traffic a low rhythm under the silence. "You don't have to do it alone," I said quietly. She turned fully toward me, and for the first time, there was no polite distance in her eyes. Only warmth. Fear. Longing. "Don't say that," she murmured. "You make it sound too easy." "Maybe it is," I replied. Her hand was resting on the windowsill, fingers tense. Slowly, almost without thinking, I reached out, my fingertips brushing hers. She didn't pull away. Her breath caught, and I could feel her pulse through the small space between our hands. Neither of us moved. "This isn't fair to you," she said softly. "I keep drawing you in, and I don't even know why." "You do know," I said, voice trembling slightly. The silence between us stretched until it felt alive, thick with everything we weren't saying. Her eyes searched mine, as if asking for permission neither of us should give. Then she exhaled slowly, her voice breaking the stillness. "I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this." And before I could think, she leaned forward, not a kiss, not yet, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath, the faint trace of coffee and rain in something entirely her. For a long, fragile second, we hovered there, suspended between right and wrong, between reason and something far more human. Then she stepped back, her voice barely steady. "If we take one more step, we can't go back," she said. I looked at her, heart pounding, and whispered, "Maybe I don't want to." The clock ticked somewhere in the background, each second louder than the last. And for the first time, neither of us looked away. The weekend came and went in silence. No messages. No glances. Just the echo of what almost happened, the memory of a line we nearly crossed and the weight of what it meant. When Monday arrived, the office felt different. Brighter, louder, as if the world had decided to move on even if we hadn't. I tried to act normal, but every time I caught the faint sound of her laugh from down the hall, something inside me twisted. That afternoon, she appeared at my desk. Calm. Composed. Like nothing had ever happened. But when our eyes met, there was a flicker, a softness that told me she remembered every second too. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. We found an empty meeting room at the far end of the corridor, blinds drawn, light filtering in through the glass in pale streaks. She closed the door gently, turning to face me with that same calm that always disarmed me. "I've been thinking about Friday," she began. "About everything." I said nothing, waiting. She took a deep breath. "You're kind. Sincere. You make people feel seen." And somewhere along the way, I started letting that mean more than it should. Her voice trembled on the last word, and for the first time, she looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "It wasn't just you," I said quietly. "You didn't imagine it." Her eyes met mine, steady, searching. "I know. That's what makes it harder." For a long moment, there was only silence. The kind that feels like both a goodbye and an apology. "I don't regret it," she said finally. "Feeling something again. You reminded me that I'm still human. That connection doesn't vanish just because life becomes complicated." Her words hit me with unexpected tenderness. She wasn't running from what we'd shared. She was honoring it, giving it dignity instead of shame. She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "But we both know where this leads if we keep going. And neither of us deserves to lose ourselves in a secret that can't survive in the open." I swallowed hard. "So this is it?" Her gaze softened. "No. This is us choosing not to ruin something that was real." She stepped closer, not too close, just enough for me to feel her warmth. Then, gently, she placed her hand against my chest, right over my heartbeat. "You'll meet someone who looks at you the way I never could," she said softly. "And when that happens, you'll understand why we stopped here." I nodded, unable to speak. Her hand lingered for a second longer, then fell away. As she walked toward the door, the light caught her profile, calm, graceful, quietly strong. Just before leaving, she turned back with a small, wistful smile. "You really were the best distraction I ever had." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving the room echoing with her voice, her scent, and the quiet ache of something beautiful that couldn't last. I stood there, breathing in the stillness, knowing that even if she was gone, some part of me would always stay in that moment by the window, where two people almost forgot who they were supposed to be, and simply felt.